25-year-old Mustang won't eat until he hears an old friend's voice. What follows is truly heartwarming. The barn was eerily quiet, filled with an unsettling stillness. Max, the once strong Mustang, now stood hunched in the corner of his stall. His once thick and glossy coat was now thin and dull. His body, once full of power and energy, had grown frail, his ribs visible beneath his skin. He hadn't eaten in days, and his eyes, usually bright and full of life, now seemed empty, as if they had lost their spark. Ethan, his owner, kneeled beside him, holding out a carrot, his hand trembling. "Come on, Max," Ethan whispered, his voice barely more than a soft plea. "Please, just one bite." But Max didn't move. His head hung low, and his breathing was slow, almost as if he was too tired to even care. Ethan's heart sank. He had spent years with Max, through thick and thin. Together, they had shared countless adventures, crossed many miles, and faced many challenges. Max had always been there for him, strong and full of spirit. But now it seemed like the life had drained from him. Ethan reached out to gently stroke Max's mane, his eyes filled with worry. He couldn't understand what had happened. Max had always been a fighter. He had been through so much in his life, but this felt different. What could make a horse like Max stop fighting? The question echoed in Ethan's mind as he sat beside his friend. Max had always been strong, always had the will to survive, no matter the odds. But now he seemed to have given up. Was this the end? Was there nothing left to do? Ethan refused to believe it. He couldn't give up on Max. Not after everything they had been through together. But the question still lingered. Why had Max stopped fighting? Was it physical, or was something else going on? Would you like to continue with more of Ethan's struggle to save Max, or explore his past to understand their bond? Years ago, Max was a force of nature. His coat, a rich chestnut brown, shone like polished copper in the sunlight. His muscles rippled with strength as he galloped across the open plains, his hooves striking the ground with the power of thunder. He was wild, free, and untamed, a spirit that could not be confined by fences or rules. He had been born in the wild, raised on the endless expanse of the desert, where he ran with the wind, his mane flying like a banner. Max was a symbol of strength and freedom, a horse with a heart as wild as the land he roamed. Back then, his eyes were full of fire, and every stride seemed to echo the pulse of nature itself. No one could tame him, not with ropes, not with bridle, and certainly not with words. He was a horse who answered to no one but the call of the open sky. Ethan first saw Max when he was just a young man, fresh out of school and eager to begin a life in the world of horses. He had heard stories of the wild Mustangs, the untamed creatures that roamed the vast open spaces. Max was different from the others. He had been captured after a long chase, his spirit unbroken, his eyes wild with defiance. The first time Ethan laid eyes on Max in the corral, he was struck by the horse's sheer strength and raw beauty. He could see the fire in Max's eyes, a flame that no man could extinguish. There was a challenge in those eyes, as if Max was saying, "You think you can tame me?" Ethan's heart raced. He saw more than just a horse. He saw a companion, a friend, someone who would understand him in a way no one else could. It wasn't love at first sight, though. Max was stubborn, wild, and uncooperative. Ethan had to work tirelessly to gain his trust. Day after day, he would go into the corral, speaking softly, offering treats, slowly breaking down the walls Max had built around himself. And little by little, Max began to accept Ethan. One day, after weeks of patience, Ethan approached Max, his heart pounding with hope. The horse didn't pull away. Instead, he nuzzled Ethan's hand, a silent agreement forming between them. That was the moment their bond was sealed. Max had chosen him. Once they had built their bond, there was nothing Max and Ethan couldn't do together. They rode across valleys, climbed hills, and raced through open fields. Max's strength and speed were unmatched, and Ethan marveled at how effortless it all seemed. They were a team, a perfect harmony between man and horse. They traveled to rodeos where Max became the star, his natural grace and power captivating everyone who watched. But what made their bond so special wasn't the crowds or the ribbons. It was the quiet moments, sitting together at the edge of a stream, sharing a meal after a long ride, or simply watching the sun set over the horizon. Ethan and Max shared 1,000 adventures, some of which were filled with laughter, others with hardship, but each one brought them closer. Max was more than just a horse. He was a friend, a confidant, a partner in every sense of the word. Would you like me to continue to the next section where we discuss Max's struggle and how Ethan faces the challenge of helping him recover? It started subtly at first, small signs that Max wasn't his usual self. Ethan noticed it one morning as he approached the barn. Max didn't whinny when he heard the familiar sound of Ethan's footsteps. His ears didn't perk up. Instead, the Mustang remained standing in his stall, staring blankly ahead, as though he were lost in a world of his own. First, Ethan brushed it off. He thought maybe Max was just tired after a long week of riding and exercise. But as the days went by, the signs became harder to ignore. Max refused his meals. He turned away from the hay Ethan carefully prepared for him, and when he did try to eat, he struggled to chew. His once vibrant eyes began to dull, and his movements grew slow and stiff. Ethan could see the weight loss in Max's body, the way his ribs began to show more and more with each passing day. The once powerful Mustang who had raced through fields with the wind was now barely able to walk without wincing in pain. His hooves, which had always been strong and steady, now seemed fragile, as though they could break at any moment. Ethan's heart began to sink with each passing day, and the worry that had been lingering at the back of his mind turned into a sharp, unrelenting fear. Max was no longer the horse he once was, and Ethan knew it. The spirit in the Mustang's eyes, the same spirit that had once challenged every fence, every bridle, every command, was fading. Max wasn't the same horse. Something was terribly wrong. And as the days turned into weeks, Ethan began to fear that his friend might be slipping away. Ethan refused to give up on Max, no matter how dire the situation seemed. He tried everything, every remedy, every treatment. He took Max to the best veterinarians in the area, hoping for some answer, some solution to the pain that seemed to consume his horse. The doctors ran tests, checking for anything from infections to internal injuries, but every result came back negative. Nothing seemed physically wrong, and yet Max's condition continued to worsen. In the barn, Ethan worked tirelessly, staying by Max's side, encouraging him to eat, to drink, to move. He brought him fresh water every hour, sat beside him for hours at a time, and whispered to him, just as he had done during their adventures. He talked to him about the old days, about the races, the fields they had ridden through, and the quiet nights under the stars. Ethan knew that it wasn't just Max's body that was struggling. It was his spirit. This wasn't just a physical ailment. It was something deeper. The once proud horse who had refused to be tamed, who had fought so hard to survive the wild, was now surrendering to something beyond his control. And Ethan couldn't accept it. He tried everything he could think of to revive that spark in Max's eyes. He took him out for short walks, hoping to get him moving again. He massaged his legs, trying to ease the stiffness in his joints. Ethan even brought Max's favorite treats, carrots, apples, and sugar cubes, hoping they would bring him some comfort. But nothing worked. Max was still distant, still silent. Every night, as Ethan lay in his bed, he would hear the soft sounds of the barn, Max's gentle breathing, the shuffle of his hooves on the hay. And every night, the same question haunted him. Is this the end? One rainy afternoon, as Ethan sat in the barn, his hands resting on Max's side, he heard a familiar voice from the entrance. It was Sophie, a longtime friend and neighbor who had always been close to both Ethan and Max. Sophie had seen Max's strength and spirit firsthand and had watched the bond grow between them over the years. She had been there for the highs, the victories, and the celebrations, and now she was here for the lowest of lows. Ethan? Sophie called softly, her voice filled with concern as she stepped inside. How's he doing? Ethan looked up, his face etched with exhaustion. Not good, Sophie. He's just fading. I've tried everything, but nothing's working. I don't know what to do anymore. His voice cracked as the weight of his failure pressed down on him. Sophie walked over and gently placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "He's a fighter, Ethan. You know that. You've both been through so much together." Ethan nodded, his eyes welling up with tears. "But what if he's given up? What if he can't fight anymore?" Sophie knelt beside Max, running her fingers through his mane. "Max has always been wild, right? You've always said he could never be tamed. Maybe it's not about fighting anymore. Maybe he just needs to know that he's not alone." Sophie's words struck a chord deep inside Ethan. He had been so focused on trying to make Max fight, on trying to bring back the strong, wild Mustang he had known, that he had overlooked the one thing that truly mattered: love. Max didn't need to fight anymore. He needed to know that he was still loved, still cherished, no matter what. Sophie's visit became a turning point for Ethan. It wasn't about curing Max's condition. It was about healing the bond they shared, reminding Max that he wasn't alone. Sophie's calming presence helped Ethan see things more clearly. With a renewed sense of purpose, Ethan returned to Max's side, not with the urgency to make him better, but with a quiet resolve to just be there for him, to sit with him, to speak softly, and to remind Max of the adventures they had shared and the memories they had made. In the days that followed, things slowly began to change. Max didn't miraculously recover overnight, but a subtle shift occurred. He started to eat a little more, he began to lift his head slightly, and for the first time in weeks, his eyes sparkled with a faint glimmer of recognition. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give Ethan hope. Would you like to proceed to Max's gradual recovery, or explore how this renewed hope impacts their bond even more deeply? Ethan's heart had been heavy for weeks, watching Max fade away, each day feeling like an eternity. But one afternoon, as he sat quietly next to Max in the barn, an old memory suddenly flooded his mind, one that he hadn't thought about in years. It was about Thunder, the horse Max had once been inseparable from. Thunder was a beautiful black stallion, with a mane so dark it almost seemed to blend into the night sky. He was Max's first true companion, the one horse who had understood Max's wild spirit, his untamable nature. Together, they had been unstoppable, two forces of nature, galloping through the plains like lightning. Ethan remembered how Max had first met Thunder, just a few years after they'd become friends. Thunder had appeared one day wild and free, just like Max had once been. The two horses had locked eyes, and there had been an immediate connection, a bond so powerful that it was impossible to ignore. Thunder had become Max's constant companion, and together, they had explored every corner of the ranch, sharing countless adventures. But one fateful day, Thunder had been injured during a ride. The accident was severe, and no matter how hard Ethan tried, Thunder's injuries were too much for him to overcome. It was a painful time for both Max and Ethan. Thunder had passed away, and Max, who had once been so full of life, had retreated into himself. Ethan remembered how Max had mourned his friend, standing silently by Thunder's grave for hours, refusing to leave. Now, sitting next to Max in the barn, Ethan realized that it wasn't just physical illness that had been wearing Max down. It was grief. Max had never fully healed from Thunder's loss. And while Ethan had been so focused on trying to restore Max's physical strength, he hadn't taken into account the emotional weight his horse was carrying. The memory of Thunder's passing was a painful one, but it also gave Ethan clarity. If Max was to heal, it wasn't just his body that needed tending to, it was his spirit. Max needed to reconnect with that spark of life he had once shared with Thunder. And maybe, just maybe, that spark could be rekindled. A week after that moment of reflection, something extraordinary happened. Something that would forever change the course of Max's recovery. It was early morning when Ethan went out to check on Max. The barn was still quiet, the sun barely peeking over the horizon. He walked to Max's stall, his steps slow and careful. As he entered, he was met with a surprising sight. Max was standing at the door, his head turned toward something outside. He was alert, his ears perked, and there was an energy in the air that hadn't been there for weeks. At first, Ethan thought it might be another animal or perhaps a visitor. But then, as he looked closer, his breath caught in his chest. Standing just outside the barn was a horse, a large, strong black stallion with a familiar, strikingly similar build to Thunder. It was as if Thunder himself had returned. The new horse didn't immediately enter the barn, but instead stood there, calmly watching Max with an intensity that made Ethan's heart race. Max, for the first time in weeks, took a few cautious steps forward, his eyes fixed on the horse outside. His body, once weak and lethargic, seemed to hold a sudden spark of life. Ethan felt a surge of emotion. Could it really be? Was this some kind of sign? The horse outside the barn wasn't Thunder, but he had the same presence, the same strength. And something about his gaze, the way he and Max were looking at each other, made Ethan feel that this was more than just a coincidence. With careful steps, Ethan led Max outside, gently guiding him toward the new horse. As they drew closer, Max's steps became more confident. His ears pricked up, and for the first time in weeks, he trotted toward the horse as if he were a younger version of himself, full of life and energy. The two horses stood face to face, their eyes locked in a moment of quiet recognition. Though the new horse was not Thunder, he carried with him the energy and strength that Max had lost after his old companion's death. Max, sensing the connection, nudged the horse with his nose, and for the first time in what felt like forever, his head was lifted high. The spark of his wild spirit, the one that had seemed lost, was beginning to reignite. Ethan watched in awe as Max and the new horse exchanged a silent communication, one that Ethan could feel deep within his soul. Max had found a new friend, a new companion to help him heal. The bond between the two horses was instant, and Ethan knew that this was exactly what Max needed. Another spirit to share his journey with. As the new horse nickered softly, Max responded, his usual vibrant whinny filling the air. Ethan's heart swelled with hope. Max was beginning to find his strength again, not just through medical care, but through the power of companionship and healing. This was the turning point. Max wasn't just recovering physically. He was rediscovering the joy and connection that had once made him the proud, wild Mustang he was. And with the arrival of this new friend, Max was starting to believe in life again. Would you like me to continue to explore how this new relationship helps Max fully recover, or dive deeper into the emotional transformation Ethan experiences in the process? Days passed, and the connection between Max and the new horse, who Ethan had named Storm, grew stronger with each encounter. It was clear that Storm was more than just a companion. He was a catalyst for Max's healing, offering him a sense of friendship and support that Max had desperately needed. Ethan could see the change in Max each day. The once sluggish, defeated horse was now more energetic, more alert. He would eagerly trot toward Storm every morning, nicker to him as they shared a moment of quiet understanding, and even nudge him gently, as if to remind him of their bond. The healing power of their connection was undeniable. Max's body began to grow stronger, but it was the revival of his spirit that truly amazed Ethan. The once desolate and empty eyes of his horse were now alive with energy. It was as though Storm had brought back the lost spark Max had when he was younger, before Thunder's death had weighed so heavily on his heart. Ethan, though overjoyed at the progress Max had made, was still cautious. He knew this was just the beginning, that true recovery would take time, but for the first time in months he felt real hope. He couldn't help but marvel at how the power of friendship between two animals could heal wounds that medicine alone could not. Watching their daily interactions filled Ethan with gratitude. Storm wasn't just helping Max regain his strength, he was teaching Ethan something invaluable. The unspoken bond between horses, their ability to lift each other up, mirrored the way human friendships and relationships could help heal even the deepest scars. Max had finally found a new companion, someone who understood him without words, and with Storm's presence, Max was starting to believe in life again. One particularly sunny afternoon, Ethan decided it was time for Max to experience the joy of running again. He had been training with him for weeks, allowing Max to regain his strength gradually, but today felt different. Today, Max seemed ready to break free, to run with the wind beneath his hooves like he had in his younger days. Ethan led both horses to a large open field, a place where Max had once run wild, free, and untamed. The air was warm, the sun shining brightly, and the ground beneath their hooves soft and inviting. Ethan's heart raced with anticipation as he unclipped the lead rope from Max's halter and let it fall to the ground. Storm was already prancing excitedly, as though he, too, sensed that something special was about to unfold. Max hesitated for just a moment, looking back at Ethan with those bright, intelligent eyes. Then, as if making up his mind, Max bolted forward, his hooves pounding the earth in rhythm with the beating of Ethan's heart. Storm followed, galloping alongside him, their strides in perfect harmony. Ethan watched with a lump in his throat as the two horses galloped across the field, their powerful bodies cutting through the tall grass, their manes flying in the wind. It was as though the weight of the past few months had been lifted from Max's shoulders, and he was finally free. Free to run, free to be himself, free to live without the shadow of grief that had once clouded his every step. There was a moment, just a brief moment, when Max and Storm locked eyes as they ran side by side. The world seemed to slow, and for a heartbeat, everything was perfect. The bond between them was undeniable, and in that shared moment of joy, Max found his freedom again. As the two horses continued to run, Ethan stood at the edge of the field, tears welling in his eyes. He couldn't help but smile, overcome with a profound sense of happiness and relief. Max had returned to himself, and it was all thanks to the power of friendship and the healing presence of Storm. In that moment, Ethan realized something he had never truly understood before, that the most powerful form of healing came not from medicine, but from the love and connection shared between friends, both human and animal. The field echoed with the sound of hooves, but to Ethan, it was more than just the sound of horses running. It was the sound of a new chapter being written in Max's life, a chapter full of hope, joy, and the promise of more adventures to come. Would you like me to continue exploring how Max's healing journey continues, or delve deeper into the emotional impact this reunion has on Ethan and the horses? As the months passed, the bond between Max and Storm only grew stronger. But with the healing process came something even more unexpected: Max's transformation into an ambassador for wild Mustangs and the spirit of resilience. It wasn't long before Ethan realized that Max wasn't just recovering for himself. He was meant to share his story with the world. Max's journey, from the brink of death to regaining his strength and spirit through friendship, had touched something deep inside people. Word of his recovery had spread, and soon, Max became a symbol of hope for other animals and their owners. His story was a reminder that no matter how lost or broken something seemed, there was always a chance for renewal. Ethan, inspired by his horse's transformation, began reaching out to animal welfare organizations and conservation groups focused on protecting wild Mustangs. He started to advocate for their preservation, using Max as a living testament to the strength and resilience these animals possessed. Max was no longer just a horse, he was a voice for the voiceless. Through local events, social media campaigns, and outreach programs, Ethan and Max traveled to schools, animal sanctuaries, and community centers, sharing their journey of healing and hope. Wherever they went, people listened. People were moved by Max's story and the power of his bond with Storm. The more Ethan shared Max's tale, the more he realized that Max was part of something much larger. A movement to protect wild horses, to ensure that they, too, had a chance at a future. Max's story became a symbol of redemption and hope, reminding everyone who heard it that even in the darkest moments, there was always the possibility of a new beginning. And as Max continued to thrive, his role as an advocate for wild Mustangs became his new purpose. His legacy was already unfolding, inspiring countless people to stand up for the creatures who, like him, had fought so hard to survive. Max's story didn't just inspire Ethan. It had a profound impact on others as well. Among those who were deeply moved was Sophie, the young woman who had first helped Ethan during Max's darkest days. Sophie, who was passionate about animal rights and welfare, had always admired Max from afar, but now, she felt a deep connection to his journey. As Max's advocacy work grew, so did Sophie's involvement. She had been working with local animal shelters and rescue groups, but after seeing Max's transformation, she knew she had to take her involvement further. Sophie began collaborating with Ethan on his campaigns to protect wild horses, leveraging her skills and network to raise awareness. She organized fundraisers, educational events, and awareness campaigns, using Max's image to inspire people to take action. Sophie became an essential part of the movement, helping to ensure that Max's story reached even more people. Together, Ethan and Sophie traveled to schools, animal sanctuaries, and community events, speaking about the importance of protecting wild Mustangs and how individuals could make a difference. Sophie also worked tirelessly to advocate for the rehabilitation of injured and neglected animals, using Max's journey as a beacon of hope. She helped launch a program that provided veterinary care and rehabilitation services to horses who had been rescued from neglectful situations, offering them the same chance at recovery that Max had been given. As Max's story spread, it became clear that his legacy wasn't just about one horse's recovery. It was about sparking a movement of compassion and advocacy. With Sophie's help, Ethan and Max were able to touch countless lives, empowering others to believe in the power of healing, hope, and the importance of standing up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. Together, they formed an unbreakable team. Max, the advocate, Ethan, the determined caretaker, and Sophie, the passionate ally. Their work together would leave a lasting impact on the world, ensuring that the spirit of Max's journey would continue to inspire future generations. Max's legacy wasn't just about the physical strength he regained. It was about the emotional and social change he inspired. His story had become a symbol of unity, hope, and the incredible bond that could be shared between humans and animals. And as Max continued to live his days with Storm by his side, Ethan knew that his horse's legacy would endure for years to come. Would you like me to expand on how Max's advocacy work impacts the community or explore more of the journey between Ethan, Sophie, and Max as they continue to spread their message? As time passed, the seasons changed, and Max, now fully recovered and stronger than ever, continued to inspire everyone he met. However, the natural cycle of life could not be postponed forever. Max, despite his newfound strength and vigor, was no longer the young horse he once was. His body, though still resilient, was beginning to show signs of aging. Ethan knew this day would come, but when it arrived, it hit him harder than he ever imagined. Max had been more than just a horse to him. He was a friend, a partner, a companion who had helped him heal just as much as he had healed Max. Over the course of a few months, Max's energy began to wane. His once powerful gallop slowed, and he seemed to tire more easily. Ethan knew that Max had reached the final chapters of his journey, but he refused to give in to despair. Instead, he chose to cherish every moment they had left together. On the days when Max seemed particularly tired, Ethan would sit beside him in the pasture, quietly reflecting on everything they had accomplished together. He knew that the horse had brought something far greater into his life than just the joy of running. Max had taught him resilience, love, and the importance of never giving up, no matter the obstacles. Though Max's body was slowing down, his spirit remained unbroken. He still nickered with affection when Ethan approached, still nudged Storm in playful gestures, and still looked at Ethan with those wise, trusting eyes. But the time was coming to let go. Ethan had been prepared for this moment, but it didn't make it any easier. Max was ready to move on, and while Ethan would never forget the horse's influence on his life, he knew that Max's spirit would always be with him, no matter what. When the day finally arrived for Max to pass peacefully, it was clear to everyone that it wasn't just the end of his life. It was the end of a legacy. Ethan had never imagined that his horse's story would touch so many lives, and now, as he stood by Max's side in his final moments, he realized just how much his horse had given him. Max was surrounded by the people who had helped make his journey possible. Ethan, Sophie, and the countless volunteers who had supported the cause for wild Mustang conservation. The air was filled with love and gratitude as Max peacefully lay under his favorite tree, his eyes soft but full of life. Ethan had always said that the most important thing was not how long Max had lived, but how he had lived. Max had embodied resilience and perseverance, never giving up despite the trials he had faced. And as Max took his last breath, Ethan found peace in knowing that his horse's legacy would live on forever in the hearts of all who had been touched by his story. Max's passing was not without sadness. but it was also a moment of celebration. The journey they had shared together was extraordinary, and it had left an indelible mark on the world. In honor of Max's life and the impact he had made, Ethan and Sophie organized a memorial event to celebrate his memory. The gathering was filled with stories, photos, and fond memories of the horse who had given so much to everyone around him. At the center of the event stood a plaque, a tribute to Max's resilience, his friendship, and his advocacy for wild Mustangs. The plaque, titled Max's Legacy, was placed near the tree where Max had spent his final moments. It would serve as a reminder to all who visited that even the greatest of struggles could be overcome with love, determination, and the support of those around you. In the days that followed, Ethan found solace in knowing that Max had not only inspired him but had inspired so many others. Through his advocacy work, Max had helped bring awareness to the plight of wild Mustangs, and his legacy would continue to inspire change. His story would be passed down through generations, a timeless reminder that even the most difficult battles could be won with a friend by your side. As the years passed, Max's memory remained alive in the hearts of those who knew him. Ethan continued to honor his horse's legacy by working toward the protection and preservation of wild Mustangs, ensuring that Max's voice, his spirit, would never be forgotten. Max had been more than just a horse. He had been a hero, a symbol of hope and perseverance. His legacy was now etched into the very fabric of the wild Mustang movement, and in the hearts of all who had been fortunate enough to witness his incredible journey. Would you like me to explore how Max's legacy continues to impact future generations? Or would you like to expand more on the memorial and the emotional journey Ethan experienced in the aftermath of Max's passing? As Ethan looked back on the incredible journey he had shared with Max, it became clear that their story was not just one of friendship. It was a testament to the strength of the human-animal bond and the power of resilience in the face of adversity. Max had taught him more than just how to care for a horse. He had shown him the importance of never giving up, no matter how difficult life became. Max had come into Ethan's life when he was at his lowest, just as Ethan was beginning to lose faith in the idea of hope and healing. But through their connection, they had both found something extraordinary: a shared sense of purpose, a deep understanding, and an unwavering commitment to one another. Together, they had overcome so many obstacles, proving that no matter how broken something seemed, there was always a way to rebuild, to heal, and to grow stronger. Max's journey had been about more than just physical recovery. It had been about emotional and spiritual growth, about the power of companionship and the importance of believing in each other even when the world seemed to doubt them. Max's resilience had inspired Ethan to keep fighting, to keep advocating for what was right, and to never lose sight of the bigger picture. Through Max's story, Ethan had learned that true strength was not about the absence of weakness, but about the ability to rise above it, to keep moving forward with love, determination, and a fierce will to live. Max's legacy would continue to remind Ethan, and everyone who heard their story, that no matter how tough life gets, there is always hope. Max's legacy was not just one of personal triumph. It was a call to action for all who encountered his story. His journey had shown the world that we all have the power to make a difference, to advocate for those who cannot speak for themselves, and to take a stand for the voiceless creatures who share this world with us. Now, more than ever, the need for people to come together to protect wild Mustangs and other animals in need is urgent. Max's story was just the beginning, and it was up to each of us to carry the torch forward. The fight for the preservation of wild horses, for the rehabilitation of injured animals, and for the advocacy of compassionate care was not over. It was ongoing, and it needed passionate individuals to continue the work Max had started. Ethan and Sophie, inspired by Max's memory, called upon others to join their mission. They urged people to get involved in supporting animal welfare organizations, whether through donations, volunteering, or simply spreading awareness about the importance of protecting wild Mustangs. Every small action could lead to a larger, collective impact. Max's story showed that even one voice, one person, one horse, could change the world. Together, we can make a difference. Whether it's through educating others, supporting animal advocacy programs, or simply giving an animal the love and care it deserves, there is always something we can do. As we remember Max and all he represented, Let us honor his legacy by stepping up for the animals who need us most. Let's carry his spirit forward, ensuring that the lessons of love, resilience, and hope continue to inspire others. The fight for a better world for wild Mustangs and all animals is just beginning, and we each have a role to play. Max's journey reminds us that no matter where we are in life, there is always room for growth, healing, and transformation. Through love, compassion, and determination, we can make a lasting impact. Let's take the lessons Max taught us and use them to make the world a kinder, more hopeful place for every living creature.